Femi had barely touched his Christmas dinner when his father pushed his plate aside and laughed. Your cousins build companies. Your brother bought a house. And you? You still have nothing worth mentioning. Nobody defended Femi. Then the front doorbell rang. His uncle opened it, only to find a bank manager asking one question. Is Mr. Femi Okoro here? The room fell silent. No one understood why a bank manager would come to a family Christmas dinner looking for the man they had just called a failure. My name is Femi Okoro. I was 33 years old, and my family believed I had achieved nothing in life. I worked as a corporate restructuring consultant, helping companies solve difficult financial problems, but I never talked about my work because most of it was private. My father didn't care about the kind of work I did. To him, success meant driving an expensive car, living in a big house, and showing everyone how much money you had. Since I lived a simple life, he decided I had wasted my education. Every Christmas, he found a new reason to compare me with my younger brother, who had just opened a beautiful business with money my parents proudly helped him raise. That night was no different. As we sat around the dinner table, my father laughed and told everyone that my brother had made the family proud while I had nothing worth talking about. One by one, my relatives agreed with him. Some smiled, others shook their heads, but nobody defended me. I stayed quiet because I was used to being judged before anyone knew the truth. Then, just as my father was about to continue, the front doorbell rang. My uncle opened the door, and a well-dressed bank manager asked one simple question that instantly silenced the entire room. Is Mr. Femi Okoro here? I stood up from my chair and walked to the front door. Every person at the table watched me as if they already knew something was wrong. Outside, the bank manager gave me a polite smile and quickly apologized for arriving during our Christmas dinner. He said he had been trying to call me for several days, but I had been too busy to answer because I had turned my phone off during the holidays. He explained that an important authorization needed my approval before the banks closed for Christmas. Then he looked around carefully and lowered his voice. He asked if I was comfortable speaking in private because the matter involved confidential financial information that could not be discussed in front of other people. I nodded, and we stepped farther away from the house. While he explained the situation, I noticed my father standing behind the dining room window, watching every movement. From the expression on his face, I could tell he had already reached his own conclusion. He probably believed the bank manager had come to collect unpaid debts or deliver bad news. After a few minutes, the manager thanked me for my time, shook my hand, and reminded me to contact him the next morning. I walked back inside without saying a single word about our conversation because it was not my information to share. The silence only made everyone more curious. My relatives exchanged nervous looks and started whispering to one another. Within minutes, different stories were spreading around the room. Some believed I was in serious financial trouble, while others thought I had been hiding a secret from the family for years. Nobody asked me what had really happened. They simply believed the version that matched what they already thought about me. The next morning, my younger brother was full of excitement. He invited the whole family to visit the commercial building he had recently bought. My parents were smiling with pride, and every relative kept telling him how successful he was. They walked through the building, praising every room and talking about how bright his future looked. I quietly followed behind everyone, looking around without saying much. Because of my work, I had learned to notice small details that other people often missed. Almost immediately, I saw things that didn't seem right. Some offices had been renovated, but others were left unfinished. Building materials were lying in the hallways as if the work had suddenly stopped. A few workers looked uncomfortable whenever someone asked when everything would be completed. My brother quickly changed the subject each time. Later, I heard one of my uncles ask how the building had been financed. The building manager forced a smile, gave a short answer, and quickly walked away. His reaction caught my attention. It looked like he didn't want anyone asking more questions. My family noticed none of this because they were too busy celebrating my brother's achievement. They were taking photos, laughing, and talking about future business plans. As we prepared to leave, one of the contractors quietly walked toward me. He looked at me carefully before asking, "Are you Femi Okoro?" When I said yes, his expression changed. He lowered his voice and said he recognized my name from an important business case several years earlier. Then he asked if we could meet privately another day because there was something he believed I needed to know. Later that evening, after we returned home, I took off my coat and reached into my pocket before hanging it up. That was when I found the business card the bank manager had quietly slipped into my hand before leaving our Christmas dinner. I almost forgot about it. As I looked at the card more carefully, I noticed something written on the back in blue ink. It was the name of a senior credit officer I had worked with several years earlier during a difficult company restructuring. We had not spoken in a long time, but I remembered him as someone who never contacted people without a very important reason. The next morning, I called the number and asked if we could meet. He agreed without hesitation and asked me to come to his office that afternoon. When I arrived, he welcomed me warmly, but I could tell from his face that this was not a normal business meeting. I expected him to ask about my own finances or some document that needed my signature. Instead, he closed the office door and looked directly at me. He asked one question that immediately caught my attention. Femi, were you aware that your name recently appeared during a financial review connected to someone close to your family? I was completely surprised. I slowly shook my head because I had no idea what he was talking about. He remained silent for a few moments before explaining that he could not legally share confidential information without the proper authorization. The rules did not allow him to reveal names, accounts, or private documents. Even so, he wanted me to know that the situation was much more serious than it appeared. He said certain records had raised questions, and my name had unexpectedly become part of the review. Before I left, he advised me not to make quick decisions or believe family rumors. The full story is still hidden, he said quietly. When the right documents come together, everything will finally make sense. 2 days after my meeting with the credit officer, I received an unexpected phone call from a man I had not spoken to in many years. He introduced himself as the retired accountant who had worked closely with my late grandfather for a long time. I remembered him only vaguely because I had been much younger when he visited our family home. He told me that someone had mentioned what happened during our Christmas dinner and that he felt it was finally time to contact me. His voice was calm, but every word sounded important. He asked if we could meet because there was something my grandfather had always wanted the family to understand. When we met, he brought a small notebook filled with old handwritten notes. He explained that my grandfather never trusted important financial matters to memory alone. He believed family members could forget conversations, misunderstand promises, or remember events differently over time. That was why every major financial decision was always written down, dated, and supported with proper records. According to him, my grandfather repeated this rule many times before he passed away. Then his expression became serious. He told me there was one important instruction that had never been fully explained to the family after my grandfather's death. He believed that because of this missing information, people had spent years believing a story that was never completely true. Sadly, he no longer had all the original files because they had been transferred after his retirement. However, he knew exactly who had received them and where those records could still be found. As I listened, I realized this was no longer just about the strange visit from the bank manager or the questions surrounding my brother's business. The answers seemed to be buried many years in the past. For the first time, I believed the truth had been waiting quietly all along, hidden inside documents that almost everyone had forgotten. A few days later, my father called everyone together for another family meeting. His voice on the phone made it clear that this was not an invitation. It was a demand. When I arrived, the living room was already full. My parents, my brother, my uncles, my aunts, and several cousins were all waiting for me. The moment I walked inside, the conversation stopped. My father looked directly at me with disappointment on his face. Instead of asking if everything was all right, he accused me of bringing shame to the family. He said bank officials, business people, and strangers kept asking about me, yet I refused to explain anything. He believed I was hiding something that would embarrass everyone. One by one, my relatives joined the discussion. Some asked if I was in financial trouble. Others wanted to know if I had become involved in a legal dispute. A few even suggested that I should stop keeping secrets from the family. They all wanted answers, but none of them asked calmly. They had already decided I must be guilty of something. I remained quiet because I still did not have permission to share confidential information that involved other people. Just as I was about to speak, the doorbell rang. Everyone turned toward the front door. A courier stood outside holding a large sealed folder. He asked only one question. "Is Mr. Femi Okoro here?" When I stepped forward, he checked my identification and politely explained that the package could only be given to me. I signed the delivery form, and he handed me the envelope before leaving. The room became completely silent. Every pair of eyes followed the sealed folder in my hands. My father folded his arms as if he expected the envelope to prove everything he already believed. Slowly, I opened it, knowing that whatever was inside might change the direction of this entire story. I carefully opened the sealed folder while everyone watched me without saying a word. My father seemed certain that the documents would finally prove I had been hiding something from the family. My brother leaned forward, trying to see what was inside. I slowly turned the first page, expecting a legal notice or some financial demand. Instead, I found something completely different. The folder contained a detailed financial timeline. Every page was filled with dates, company records, loan restructurings, business guarantees, and ownership changes that stretched back many years. It was not accusing anyone of a crime, and it was not about an inheritance. It simply showed a clear history of important financial decisions connected to several businesses. As I continued reading, one company name immediately caught my attention. It was the same commercial building and business my family had proudly celebrated only days earlier. I looked more closely and began comparing the dates in the documents with the stories I had heard from my family over the years. The more I compared them, the more confused I became. Certain events had happened in a completely different order than everyone remembered. Some business decisions had been explained one way inside the family, but the official records told a different story. Even the dates did not match the stories that had been repeated for years. I quietly turned each page while the room remained silent. Nobody interrupted because they could see from my face that the documents were important. Every record connected to another one, creating a complete picture that nobody had ever seen before. It became clear that many misunderstandings were not caused by lies alone but by missing pieces of information that had never been shared. Then I reached the final pages. There, a short note referred to another agreement that was supposed to be attached to the file. I searched through every document again, but it was missing. That single missing page suddenly became the most important part of the entire timeline because without it, the full truth was still incomplete. I could not stop thinking about the missing page. It felt like the one piece that connected everything else. Using the names and dates in the file, I started searching for the people who had been involved in those old business decisions. After several phone calls, I finally found one of the original executives who had signed the agreement many years earlier. He had retired and was living a quiet life. When I contacted him, he agreed to meet without hesitation. He welcomed me kindly and listened as I explained why I had come. After looking through the copies of the documents, he smiled gently and said he had been expecting someone to ask these questions one day. He told me that the missing agreement had never about hiding money or giving special treatment to anyone. It explained why certain business decisions had been made and why later financial changes followed a very specific plan. One signature on that agreement had quietly influenced many decisions over the years, even though most family members never knew it existed. Then he looked at me and said something I would never forget. He explained that my father had spent years judging me without knowing the complete story. My father believed what he had seen on the outside and never understood the work I had been doing behind the scenes. Because important information had never reached him, he created his own picture of my life, and that picture was incomplete. I asked if I should tell my family everything immediately. The retired executive slowly shook his head. He advised me not to argue, defend myself, or try to win through emotion. He said the complete record would soon be presented during a final meeting that was already being arranged. Facts are stronger than opinions, he told me. When every document is placed on the table in the right order, nobody will need an argument. The truth will explain itself better than any speech ever could. The final meeting took place a few days later in a private conference room. This time, it was not only my family sitting around the table. The bank representatives were there, along with the retired executive, the senior credit officer, and several people who had been involved in the original business transactions many years earlier. My father sat quietly beside my brother, still believing he would finally learn what I had been hiding. The atmosphere was serious because everyone knew that years of confusion were about to be cleared up. One by one, the documents were placed on the table in the exact order they had been created. The missing agreement was finally presented, and every page was carefully explained. There were no dramatic arguments or emotional speeches. The records simply showed how several businesses had faced difficult financial problems over the years. Instead of failing, those companies survived because complicated restructuring plans had been prepared and approved by experienced professionals. As the meeting continued, several people explained that I had worked behind the scenes on more than one of those difficult cases. Because of confidentiality agreements, my name had never been made public. I could never tell anyone what I had done or who I had helped. My family had spent years believing I did nothing important, while the truth was that I had quietly helped protect businesses connected to people they respected and admired. Even the commercial building my brother proudly celebrated had benefited from financial decisions connected to work like mine. I looked at my father. For the first time, he did not interrupt or argue. He slowly lowered his head as the truth became impossible to deny. He finally understood that he had judged my life by what he could see instead of what I had actually accomplished. Then one of the financial representatives said something that made the room even quieter. The biggest lesson was never about money. It was about how easily people can misunderstand someone whose greatest work happens where nobody is watching. Months passed after that final meeting, and little by little, life began to change. The confusion that had divided my family for years disappeared because the truth had finally been supported by real documents instead of opinions and assumptions. Nobody needed to argue anymore. The facts had already answered every important question. My younger brother also looked at his business differently. Instead of trying to impress everyone with quick success, he started making careful financial decisions. He listened to experienced advice, planned every step wisely, and focused on building something strong instead of something that only looked successful from the outside. One evening, my father asked if we could talk alone. There were no relatives around and no audience to watch the conversation. He looked at me for a long moment before quietly apologizing. He admitted that he had spent years measuring success in the wrong way. He believed expensive cars, large houses, and public attention were the only signs of achievement. Because my work was private and confidential, he assumed I had accomplished nothing. He told me he now understood that some of the most valuable work is never seen by the public. He also admitted that comparing me with my brother had been unfair and had caused pain he could never take back. I accepted his apology because I could see that it was honest. At the same time, I did not pretend the past had never happened. Trust takes time to rebuild, and both of us understood that. Slowly, our relationship became stronger because we finally spoke with honesty instead of judgment. Looking back, I no longer remembered that Christmas as the day my family called me a failure. I remembered it as the day the truth finally began to come out. It taught all of us that the greatest achievements are not always the loudest ones. Sometimes the most valuable work happens quietly, far away from attention, where no applause is waiting but where it still changes people's lives forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful family stories with unexpected twists. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been judged by what people could see instead of who you really were? I'd love to read your story. And remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room is carrying the greatest success.